Assalamu alaikum dear students. I am Memorusa from Peshawar Model School, Noshera campus. Today is the third SVT lecture of chemistry for grade 8, which is question number 3. Balance the following equation. I have divided this video into two parts. In the first part, I will tell you that what are the steps of balancing of chemical equation, and in the second video, I will solve all these. We will balance all these equation given in the question. Okay, now what is mean by equation is the representation of a chemical reaction, like we represent elements by its symbol, compound by its chemical formula. Similarly, we represent a chemical reaction by its equation. Okay, what is mean by chemical reaction is a process in which new substances are produced, like equation number first, two substances sodium and chlorine, these are the raw materials. It combine with each other and new substances produced, and this new substance is called product. Okay, sodium and chlorine are the raw materials, these are called a reactant and is written on the left hand side of the reaction, and the new substance produced is called product, it is written on the right hand side of the reaction. Now what is mean by balancing and unbalancing is according to the law of conservation of mass, which state that matter is neither created nor destroyed during a chemical reaction. Therefore the number of atoms of each element must be equal on both sides of a chemical equation. And the balancing mean that the number of atoms on both sides must be equal. Like we have two chlorine in the reactant, but in the product we have one chlorine. Is it a balance? No, it is a not balance. It is unbalanced, but we have to balance it. Okay, all these equation are unbalanced. And now how we will balance these equation? We have to balance this equation by the trial and error method. It is the simplest method for balancing of a chemical reaction. Now move toward the first step is write unbalanced chemical equation. The symbol and formula of the reactant and product must be corrected. In the first step, you have to write the unbalanced chemical equation like this. Okay, this is your first equation. This is unbalanced. Why it is unbalanced? Because the number of atoms on both sides are different, and the symbols and the formula must be corrected. Now the second step Now the second step, count the number of atoms of each element on both sides. In the second step, you have to count the number of atoms on both sides. Okay, give heading of reactant in on one side, and the right hand side give heading of product. Now count the number of atoms on both sides. Number first is sodium. Write the symbol of sodium. How many sodium we have in the reactant? We have only one sodium in the reactant, write one in front of it. Now move toward the product. How many sodium we have in the product? We have one sodium in the product. Now in the reactant and product we have one sodium. It is balanced, write balance in front of it. Now number second element is chlorine. How many chlorine we have in the reactant? We have two chlorine in the reactant. The subscript show that this is subscript. Okay, it show the number of atoms. Now how many chlorine we have in the reactant? We have two chlorine in the reactant, which is write 2 in with the chlorine. Now move toward the product. How many chlorine we have in the product? We have one chlorine in the product. It is unbalanced. In balancing, the number of atoms on both sides must be same, but in the but here the number of atoms is different on both sides. In the reactant we have two chlorine, but in the product we have one chlorine. It is unbalanced. Okay, write unbalanced in front of it. Now move toward the third step. If the number of atoms are different on both sides, write the required number as a coefficient of the symbol or formula. If the number of atoms are different, like the chlorine, the number of chlorine is different on both sides, we have to write a number, number 2, 3, or 2, 3 or 4 is a coefficient. Okay. Now move toward the fourth step. Work with one element at a time. If we are balancing a chlorine, we have to work with the only chlorine at one time. At a time, not work with the two elements like chlorine and sodium. Work with one element at a time. Now always start with a relatively small number. Okay, whenever we start a balancing, we have to start from a small number like 2, 3. Okay, not from a 6, 7, 8 directly. Now come toward the balancing of the first equation. How we have to balance the first equation. Now the chlorine, where the deficiency of chlorine is in the product, we have the deficiency of chlorine, okay, but in the reactant we have two chlorine, but in the product we have one chlorine. We have to balance the chlorine in the product. And in the fourth step we have already studied that start from a small number like 2 or 3. If we write 2 with the sodium chloride, let's count the number of atoms on both sides. Is it a balance or not? How many in the reactant? How many sodium we have? We have only one sodium in the reactant. Now count the number of sodium in the product. How many sodium we have in the product? Now we have two sodium in the product because we have write 2 as a coefficient, okay, then the number of sodium became 2. Now the number of sodium in the left hand side and in the right hand side become unbalanced, right, unbalanced in front of it. Now count the number of chlorine. How many chlorine we have in the reactant? We have 2 chlorine in the reactant. Now how many chlorine we have in the product? We have 2 chlorine in the product, okay, right, 2 chlorine in the product. Now the number of atoms of chlorine on both sides is balanced, right, balance in front of it. Now which thing is unbalanced? Chlorine, sodium is unbalanced. Now where the number of atoms of sodium is reduced, the number of sodium is reduced in the reactant. Now we have to write the number, we have to balance the sodium in the reactant. If we write 2 with the sodium, then it became balanced. Now count the number of atoms on both sides. Sodium, we have 2 sodium in the reactant and 2 sodium in the product. It is balanced. Now count the number of chlorine. We have 2 chlorine in the reactant and 2 chlorine in the product. Now it became balanced. This is the balancing of your first equation. Keep all the steps of balancing in your mind. In the next video we will balance the 2, 3, 4 and 5 equation. Thank you.